Well, I just want to welcome everybody and introduce you to Don Day. He's the co-founder of the Contelligencegroup.com and the co-chair of the DITA Technical Committee. And he's going to talk to us about adaptive DITA, and I'm very excited to learn more about what that really entails. So, and I think I'm gonna mute everybody while we're um, while Don is presenting. And then if you have any questions, ask me to unmute you in the chat window and I will do so, or you can just ask a quick question there, but that'll try and keep some of the background noise to a minimum. So anyway, before further ado, let's talk to Don.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. I appreciate the opportunity. And by the way, if anyone does have trouble hearing me, let Scott know in the chat window and he'll let me know. Scott, I'm not watching the chat, so I'll depend on you coming in to let me know if anything is amiss. So I've been involved with DITA for, let's see, I think the timeline that I'll try to set is around 1999, when I was actually first asked to take a look at XML for the sake of how it might fit into the IBM company that I was in at the time, and how to migrate the materials that we had at that time that were at that time in SGML, the IBM IDDoc DTD, and what to make of this new standard called XML that was coming along, and what were we going to do to approach it and make it usable. I got onto leading a work group that brought together two people from every site at IBM, both a technical person and a web designer. And through this work group, we spent a year, first of all, understanding what XML was good for and building some XML sample DTDs and applications that basically mimicked what we had been doing before. And it wasn't too surprising that we proved to ourselves, and I knew that it was going to end up this way, that if you just simply take an existing SGML application, convert it into XML, it won't help you do any more than you had been doing already. So it was clear at that point then, and we had a mandate from the company to go ahead and say, well, what can we do that will really cause elephants to dance using XML? And with the help of Michael Priestman and a number of other really wonderful thinkers, we came up with this topic-oriented architecture that represented several things. On one hand, the topic-oriented writing system that is basically taught through DITA as the kind of core instantiation of that writing architecture. And then the specialization architecture in DITA that allows it to actually be used for a wide number of applications far beyond just technical writing. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. As I lead the DITA Technical Committee, one of the constant complaints that we hear often is, well, DITA is too complicated. DITA is what it is. It's a specification, and the OASIS DITA Technical Committee, the keepers of the specification, are basically charged by the members of their committee to provide the solutions that are needed for members' customers. So we have editor vendors, we have software vendors as members of the technical committee, and they've got quite a few, quite a range of customer applications out there. So it is true that DITA does tend to look a bit like a cookbook if you sit back and take a look at the specification itself. However, no one says that you must use the entire specification, and in many cases, using just a very slim set of the capabilities allows you to do some things that you cannot do with the full spec as you've probably seen it and work with it day by day if you actually work with DITA in your organization. So the topic that I want to talk about today is, and for some reason my title didn't show, but we'll move on, is, and that's not good. Oh, I know why. I didn't. And this was in my notes to do this, so I apologize for that. What I'm doing is actually walking through a data map. You saw the map moments ago, and I'll show it to you again here. This is a data map that points to the topics that make up the content for the slides that I'll be showing this evening. I'll be using an application called impress.js, which is on GitHub, and a very nice little application for showing HTML content in kind of a Prezi style format. And so I'll be walking through dynamically displaying the data topics as I go along. And then we'll have a show and tell, and I'll give you an idea of what I've been using data for live website content as well. So the title, it was with you all along, Adaptive Content and Data. The idea here is that data was actually designed to be usable directly on the web. However, it quickly fell into a pattern of use that fit the type of workflows that most tech writing organizations use, which is a kind of a build or compile paradigm, and we'll talk about that a little later. And so some of these techniques may have been overlooked, and I think it's a nice opportunity now with the emergence of responsive websites and adaptive content. A great deal of talk that's being done about adaptive content since Karen McGrain produced a book and a very widely shared SlideShare presentation last year on adaptive content. We'll be taking a interpretive look at what adaptive content means in the data context and look at some of the challenges of doing so. So it was with you all along. If you saw the presentation, the piece that Scott sent out ahead of the discussion here, I had said, what do short desks and conditional processing have to do with adaptive content? And it's very much about timing and delivery. It's when you send information out, how you modify it, and how you get it to the right person. So we'll be taking a look at perspectives on adaptive content, how data has always been adaptive, and then what we can do with it as we look down the road. So a little background on the process and the activity here. The responsive web design is a mechanism. I've tried to boil it down to a very simple definition here. Layout in the web browser that responds to the device that you've got. There's been a growing sense that designing content for the desktop, which is typically a 1024 pixel wide browser field, is just not cutting it for content that needs to be produced to the massive number of new portable mobile web formats, both phones and tablets. And the solution to this has been responsive design, layout that responds to the device. So as you actually move from device to device with the same website, the style sheet producing the rendition on that device will actually adjust the margins and adjust the column widths to the device itself. Adaptive content, however, is a different matter. Adaptive content is content that adapts to the reader. It's what you understand about the reader and about the type of search strategy that they're using in order to help serve to them adaptively the content that makes the most sense for the time and the device that they're reading it on. So looking a little further at that, there's been the little statement that we've seen and all heard, get the right information to the right person at the right time. I looked into where this phrase originated, and it turns out that it came from the Central Intelligence Agency. It's been apparently around in spy circles for a long, long time, with the proviso that if you don't get the right information to the right person at the right time, somebody on your team may die. A little bit ominous sounding, and for information that you're producing for hardware equipment, certainly, that may still be the case. If we don't get the right information to them, someone could put their hand in the wrong place, and it could be dangerous to them. We tend to extend this little saying by saying it's not only to the right person at the right time in the right place, but in the right language. And if you get silly, then you can go on with things like in the right font and with the right images and so forth. But the statement is the prime directive for what I think we could now rename as the content intelligence aware environment. It's what can we do with the content that we have to put intelligence into it so that because of the presence of that intelligent markup in it, that it can be delivered to the right person at the right time. And so it turns out that just like the CIA of spy fame, there are similar methodologies here. You have to know your contact, you have to adapt your message, and sometimes you have to channel it through obstacles and get it past places that are very difficult to ordinarily get it. So what is it that enables the features of adaptive content? I've said here that serving content in a responsive, adaptive manner happens by different mechanisms. If you look at responsive web content, it's easy to get caught up with discussions about, well, should I use a liquid design? Should I use a grid system? But ultimately, in responsive design, you're really just talking about selecting a look and feel for your website that uses media queries to find out about the device. So the differentiation of responsive design is that it's using media queries to basically say, tell me about your device, how big is the screen, how capable is your processor, and so forth. Adaptive content, and if you think about it, this actually goes back a long way along the lines of the whole discussion about personalized content. How do you enable someone to get the content in just the form and scope that they were interested in? So adaptive content uses information about the person, and I prefer to contrast it with responsive design by saying, tell me about yourself. What can I know about you? And so with that, the holy grail is that on-demand adaptiveness is the goal that we've got for, what did we call it? Uh, Content intelligent awareness type of content. And the little picture there is just simply making the point that if we get the right content, then we can get things to do what we need them to do. The concept is old, but today's technologies are more capable than they were, say, 15 or even 10 years ago. The goal is expressed, actually, that's a full sentence in the 2 bullet points there. The dynamic or the on-demand configuration of the content and how it's delivered for the known audience and the task that they're doing, and I'm calling that the conditionality. So it's on-demand conditionality. So with that background, where does DITA fit in? DITA, again, has been around since I think we first, in fact, we did first publish it to the world in March of 2001 at a Joe Walensky Windwriters Conference in Portland, Oregon, I believe. And John Hunt and I did the presentation on that, and then in 2004, IBM donated the specification to OASIS, and it's been through 4 revisions since then. We're coming up on revision DITA 1.3. I guess that would make 3 previous revisions. And so through that, it's actually had the basic features that make it adaptive. If we look at what makes DITA content non-adaptive today, it's because of what I prefer to call the compile paradigm. So in the compile paradigm, you prepare your content, you create a DITA map, you create a DITA file that has particular processing conditions. And at the end of the day, you're producing a set of content that is pre-configured for a certain class of readers that you may have in mind. In the past year, Scott Scott Abel of content wrangler, has been publishing some articles about uh, doing persona studies, and why is it that personas end up not providing the kind of information that people are actually looking for. And the problem is that it is tied in with this compile paradigm. If you've only got one production push to get out the information that you want, then the persona that you come up with is probably not that of a single person, but is probably a blend of a group of people that best represent those you hope that your content is right for. And if it's not perfectly right for everybody, then it's probably not perfectly right for anybody. And that's one of the difficulties of trying to use this basically a shotgun approach, which is using conditions that you set at runtime, converting all of your source into a single static deliverable, and publishing that somewhere. If you've got the bandwidth to be able to do that for more than one kind of user, or for more than one kind of personalization um, profile that you've set up for them, then it follows the formula of repeat, lather, rinse, repeat. You're basically repeating that process over and over to put out a range of deliverables and then making them selectable through um, channeling methodologies or search strategies that you have to expose the particular server's worth of information that you want someone to be able to reach. So in effect, compiled content is what I like to call a one-trick pony. You do one thing with it, it does it well, but at the end of the day, it only knows that one trick. Adaptive content is a pony that when you bring it out in the ring, it may not know what it's going to do, but the rider that you put on it will have the hints and the cues, and these ponies can do more tricks than the proverbial one-trick pony. That may be a poor analogy, but we'll run with it if we can here. So actually, one of the as I was doing research for this, I came across a real interesting picture that I thought maybe gave it a little better idea of what it might be like if we were really encountering content that was truly live adaptive, and it would be like this. So here we have a cat, but if we had truly responsive content, then we get that cat to smile at us and we're happy and we've got the kind of content we were hoping for. That's probably just a really poor analogy, but again, we'll run with it. It's kind of like that. Adaptive data would give the person, at the time that they're reading it, the kind of information that best fulfills what they're looking for or what they were hoping that they would get. So how do we do that? We first of all have to understand what are the adaptive features that are in DITA, and it falls down to two primary things. DITA has a designed into it a methodology called progressive disclosure. If you look at the output from a build from any DITA content that's been basically constructed according to the principles of the methodology, you've had a short description in the topic, and whenever you hover over a link to a topic that's part of that build, you'll see that the content for the short description actually shows up in the hover text produced by hovering over the short description. That's actually a stage in progressive disclosure. You've got the title, then you've got the exposure to the short description, and then if you click on it, you get exposed to the full topic. There are various ways that this can be implemented in DITA. I'll show you some examples that are actually on a live website where a topic at any one time may have any of these three visualizations and possibly more. The other approach to making content adaptive is conditional processing, which is where you apply properties and filtering at runtime and for filtering and flagging. The difference between those two, filtering is selecting which of the content you actually want to see and always implies that something is cut out. When a photographer is taking a picture of a pretty sunset or clouds in the sky, they'll typically reach for a red filter if they're using a black and white mode on the camera. They'll reach for a red filter, and the result is that the clouds will just really pop out of the sky. It looks brilliant and white with a much darker and dramatic sky in the background. We tend to think of that as adding um, drama to the picture, but what really happened was that you took blue out of the picture, and that's what made the sky darker and created more contrast between the sky and the clouds. So filtering is always taking something out in order to enhance something else that's in the view. Flagging, on the other hand, is adding things into the view in order to draw attention to them. And so an example of flagging might be turning on a highlight color for a particular range of information, or putting a label beside something so that it's clear which version of a product that that particular piece of information applies to. So that's conditional processing, applying these properties at runtime. So what's available for adapting data content so that you can do this? There are two. We'll be looking at personalization, or the things that we can know about the person, and then we'll be looking at the ways that we can use this information. Personalization cues can be used either singly or together, and so it's this list is just some of the things that are typically in the toolkit of the information architect, the person sitting over there on the right, who's trying to get a handle on this information. Forms are what the user can tell us about themselves, so it's not untypical to provide an adaptive website some kind of a form that allows the user to say where they're from, or provide information that allows the content producer to better customize what that user is going to see. When I go to CNN.com, for example, I'll usually get this little pop-up that says which version, language or nationality version of the information do you want to see, and I select the United States, and I get selections that are more of within my interest, presumably. Analytics is what big data can tell us about the user. Big data is all the information that is out in the cloud from your interactions with the internet. Every Google search you've done, every web page you've gone to that has Google Analytics running on it, provides information back to very huge repositories that aggregate this information and then provide the uh, knowledgeable content owner some way of getting at what are the habits of people that are applying this information. Analytics are usually less reliable than direct information unless someone's lying about the direct information, but that's part of a toolkit. You don't rely on it solely. You usually use it with some of these other things. The other tools for personalization are what the users recorded about their accomplishments, about where they've been on the web. This includes log files, includes cookies that they may have left on their machine that you can go back to and be able to look at, see where they were, try to assess perhaps how much content they had been through, and record keeping. And so an example of this is there's a specification called the Tin Can API that's being used in education. Um, we're used to taking um, time managed and content managed courses on computer through learning management systems. But sometimes there are things that happen in your career that are noteworthy, but there's not a good way to log that. An example of that would be annually you might be required to read the terms of the guidelines, professional guidelines for your company, or to read the HR terms and conditions for your benefits package. And so where does someone keep this information? The Tin Can API is a method that uh, when you have completed one of these courses or completed doing one of these events, actually captures the completion of that record in a central database, and thus keeps a growing record of the informal education that you've had along your career path. And so this is another example of how information about a user can be recorded along the way, not just happenstance, but in many cases, sometimes very deliberately obtained information with permission, of course, in order to understand where a person sits with respect to goals that they may have. The Tin Can API, as you can imagine, should help an organization provide better training options for company employees. Then how do we actually use these bits of information then? What are the tools for working with them? As I mentioned, there's flagging, which is visually marking something in a view, and that's going to be through the style interface, through the browser interface, oftentimes using styles, images, and labels. Filtering, removing things, and most good information is actually, I use TMI to represent too much information. If you put the whole wad of content that you've got before the user, they may struggle to pick out the things that they want to see. Filtering will allow you to customize that so that they are seeing only what they really need to see. Contextual rendition would be being able to take, say, a data topic and in one instance show it as a titled link, and in another instance a widget on the page, and perhaps in another instance actually the full rendition of it. And so that would be adapting the content visually for the scope of information that the person needs. When you look at the list of titles for your content in a CMS, when you sort by author, for example, you may see a list of titles, but not much more. And that's because that's usually all the information that you need in order to pick out the topic or set of topics that you want to work on. And that's another example of contextual rendition. It's adapting the content for the task that the user may be in before they advance to another task or need more information. User-determined scoping, on the other hand, is keeping the information in the document, but providing features in the document to allow them to get part of the content out of the way. You often see this in toggles, which would be things that you can click on to reveal or unreveal a section of content. Accordions are the idea of vertical or horizontal labels that you click on, and they expand the information to the side or downwards to give you more scope on it. And as you click on other accordion folds, you just simply change the text in place that you're looking at without having to scroll up and down typically. And then there are tabs, which is very common for tabular information. You can think of a tab as being a label on each of the columns on a table, and you're looking at just one column at a time. And as you click on a different tab, you're revealing a different column of information within what may be a very narrow space. So many of these features are also not only adaptive information, but you could actually consider these to be a component of responsive design, where the user is able to allow the information to fit on the device that they have because they're able to control how much visibility they've got at a time. So how can we promote on-demand adaptiveness? I have grown up from a time in history when Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, if you knew what CSNY was, kudos to you, sang the song, "We've got to get ourselves back to the garden," and a metaphorical image of uh, something may have gotten out of place in the world, and there is a penchant in the longing. Albert Camus would probably like this. There's a nostalgia for absolutes, and how can we get back to that? It really plays well into adaptive content because when you're required to produce delivered content, the compile option is oftentimes the only option that you've got. But if you have the opportunity to produce web help, for example, and perhaps even dynamic web help, then you can actually do your rendition of data on the fly and then you're able to apply the conditionality at rendering time. To do that, you have to start with simple data, and my definition for that is whatever does not require two-pass resolution. Again, if you're familiar with working with compiled sim data, you hit the submit button, and then you go off and get a coffee while your 2,000 articles get crunched, not once, but um, actually twice or maybe even more times, depending on what's part of the publishing process, in order to turn it into the final deliverable. The reason for the two passes is that if you're going to filter information out, you need to do that prior to doing your build. Otherwise, you might re-include information that you had indicated that you didn't want, but that the processing rules could still see and therefore got. If you've got information that you wanted to hide from information about a future product that you didn't want to publish yet, you really need to use a two-pass process in order to strip that out in the first pass, and then you've got high assurance on the second pass that it contains only the current version of information. So simple data is anything that doesn't actually get into that kind of use of data. And it is possible on appropriately scoped projects you can actually work with content in that manner. Uh, Not everyone has to work with data full sprung from the head of Zeus, as it were. There's lots of metadata is always good. Metadata is how your search engines will be able to cue a user to the information they were searching for. But more than that, when it's actually part of your content, it gives the user the dynamic hooks in the content to be able to select or render the content the way that they want it. And so you can use filtering to adapt, but not embargo. And again, the typical scenario is that when you're doing traditional data publishing, you actually have a two-tier CMS. You've got your source CMS, you do a build, you put the results on the delivery CMS, and so it's a very bifurcated system in that sense. In web publishing, when you put an HTML document out on the web server is the CMS for that content. I like to call that a one-tier publishing database, and so using data adaptively in this manner is actually treating data almost as if it were a web topic, except it's data. And you're converting it into HTML and adapting it during that conversion to the requirement of the user. Things that you should eschew if you want to have on-demand adaptiveness for your content is, of course, anything that ties into that two-pass process. And that would include having property cascades on a map where you have to process the entire map, and in order to cascade properties down the map to the topic through all the branches that may apply their property versions to it. If you're going to render a single data topic at a time, obviously you don't have time for all of that pre-processing to happen. And so necessarily, if you can keep your requirements to where they apply to the topic independently of a map or independently of cascading properties through the map during processing, then you can get past that two-stage requirement. The use of footnotes and other relocatable content is sometimes problematic, and again, that's because unless you filter that material out, it's possible that in your viewing pass you might conref content that had been flagged for removal, but if you hadn't removed it, your conref will still pull that information in. So in a true two-pass, in a true one-pass, you want to try to avoid getting your content dependent on searching for the right term here, capabilities that would otherwise require a two-pass process. It's easier understood once you actually try it than for me to explain it, I think. But these are the words that I've come up with that you can go back and study. And then finally, using internal content for version rollback. Um, can be problematic because, like I mentioned, you have uh, to filter other version content out and allow only the content that you want to be seen. Uh, and in a CMS-based system, that's easy to do, but in a single-tier system, uh, when you have previous versions, you just want to archive the whole previous version and have only the current version out on your current database or current delivery CMS. And that's what I mean by that final point here. Let's move on. Sometimes I feel that getting into the details bogs us down. Let's just take a look at where we are here then. I've got a little demo, and I'll pop back out of our slideshow mode and go back to the Intelligence site website, which is actually built on a live data server. So all of the content that you're looking at here is live rendered data content. Each of the topics that's shown in this little carousel window is displayed on the fly. These were actually compiled into an HTML view, and then JavaScript is simply timing its way through these and showing them. But here's my progressive disclosure. I've got a title, I've got a short description, and I've got a link to take me to more information. And when I get there, then I've actually got the full topic. And there I am looking at it. I'll go back here so we can look at some other features of the live environment. Each of these featured topics is again a subset of live rendered topic content where I've got the title and I've got the short description and a feature image that was associated with that topic. When I go to the topic itself, then I see more full information about it. So this is fairly straightforward, and ordinarily when you build data for say through DITA-Open Toolkit, you're not able to access features like this because they're dynamic. They need to be determined at runtime what's going to be here. And so by using a PHP subroutine that pulls out the content that I need, I can put it into the right location on the page dynamically, which is, at least in according to the definition that I'm using, a version of adaptive content. But this is not user-adapted content. Let's go to some that is, and for that I'll go back to a backdoor that gets me to where I've got an adaptive content demo. And you're free to go to the Intelligence Group website and take a look and play with these things and actually see how they work. The topic that I've got here is an example of too much information, and I've helped it out by putting labels for the kind of audience that some of these sections apply to. So I've got a section that applies to business and all audiences who only have CMS, XML, and data product interest. I can use a form, and I mentioned before a form is a good way to let a user identify what they're interested in, and thereby select the information down to the community of interest in the content and what functional role they may have, which may play a very important part in the kind of information that they're getting here. In addition, I may put venue as part of my information. Where did they arrive here from? Did they get here from a Twitter link, from a LinkedIn link, or did they get here from Facebook? By having that information as part of my profile, then I can do selective views on this content. So we'll play the game here. I just wanted to show you the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections that are here, and then I'll pretend that I'm coming to this website having come from a venue that maybe I was in the LinkedIn CMS Business Professionals group. And so the profile that I came in with was this little "Who am I" widget here. It identified me as a CMS Biz person, and this has been used to select on the content that's business oriented and not at all technical. On the other hand, if I come in saying that I'm coming from a community, from an XML community, and that I am interested in technical, then I expect to see the business information drop out. And remember, this is happening on the fly. This was not pre-built information. And so this is adapting the content to the requirements of the user. In practice, you will be using the cues that I talked about earlier to try to determine what it is that the user is interested in, and you'll build a two-stage filter. The first one will turn the information about the user into essentially a profile stamp that can be put into any of the content during processing to HTML that applies to that search or that query. And then at rendering time, this can all be done in a single load of the information. Um, the renderer will apply whatever the views that you had on it. We're just using filtering on this content, and so we're simply filtering out anyone who's not an XML technical person, and that gives us the result view that we see here. And then finally, I wanted to point out that, again, the website is built entirely with DITA as content. The sidebar information are DITA topics. Here's an example. Let's see, no, that's not a subset. This would be a widget that's constructed of the title and a short description. And again, if I go out there, there's my title, there's my short description, and there's the rest of the content. I think, Scott, with that, it would be a good time to turn things over for some questions. I'll preface by saying I'm sure some of this is painfully obvious to some who've been creating websites before. On the other hand, the application of on-demand conversion into DITA using a single pass process is something that's a little novel in the world. And again, this is not a two-tier system. There's only one CMS. You notice down here it says edit. I'm not logged in, so I can't edit. I've got a little access control thing going on here. But I have basically this is behaving like a wiki, or in the case of information like insights, this is actually personally branded information that I may have created like a blog that I can treat as if it were a collection of information under any of the content contributors, and in which case that would make it a blog, not just a white paper. One more quick thing that I wanted to give you too was that when I go back and take the get back through my back door here, when I take a look at any of the maps, this is showing me simply the current resource that I have, which is a topic about Don Day. What I want to do is pick one of these maps, and a good one is this adaptive content map that I've got. Each of these are DITA topics. I can click on any one of these. In effect, that's a navigator, and it takes me to that topic. But if I choose, I can transform that map to aggregate all of the topics into a single deliverable. So this would be how I might construct a white paper out of a set of DITA topics with a group of people collaborating on creating that content through this one website. I've got deep structure, at least 3 deep content, and so you can see that the headings are appropriate for the indentation of that content in the web. And in the meantime, the headings are live too, in the sense that what this really is a DITA map with DITA content shoved into it. And so the links to that map are still active. I can click on that and go out to one of these topics, just as if I were still back in the standard view, the normal view, and again going out to see that topic and coming back. The things that you can do with live content again too is that you can render that content to various devices. So if you were creating web apps, you can actually access this data map as a JSON object, and there it is in JSON format. Or if you wanted to process the XML content directly, this is one view of it. This is a stylized view, and this is a text view. This would be what you might expect to get if you wanted to actually process that data content on your cell phone directly. And so implicitly, there's an API built into the system that enables you to see that. Uh, the the whole point of dynamic content is a little interesting when it comes to other resources besides data topics, because I could apply dynamic features to my data map and actually filter my map at display time as well. I haven't gotten that far in producing the implementation for this. It just applies to personalization and the topics themselves. But all of that is certainly open for business, open for opportunity. And a little word about this, the technology is a project I've been working on that I've called Expedita, E-X-P-D-I-T-A. There's a expedita.info is a website that has an older version of this content running on it. I'd encourage you to play with this version because it will give you the latest look and feel of it. And for any one of these that you're in or that you can navigate to, let me get back to where I was there. I can actually, or you can actually, having gotten to one of these topics, let's get back to the HTML view. Having gotten to one of these topics, you can do a transformed XML and actually see what the source is underneath the covers for that topic. So this is the proof that it's live on rendition content dynamically applied. So with that, Scott, let me take some questions and try to provide some answers. And if the question is sufficiently amusing, then that's where the hilarity part of the advertisement comes in.